A Plaguelands Media production.
Hey everyone, this is Hugh from Plaguelands Media bringing you another book review today. So, cheers. Now, this is a book that was requested by my good friend, Mr. Ian Van Gammett of Plaguelands Media renown. Now, this is a book that is very near and dear to his heart. It's a book that he's actually read quite a few times and absolutely loved it and was kind of dying for me to read and review it. It's a book that I actually read in high school because Ian and I had a mutual friend in high school who read this book and just kept talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. I'm not going to name any names. They know who they are. That book is Anthony Burgess's A Clockwork Orange. Now, this is the Penguin Classics edition. Hence the boring cover with the glass of milk. I'm not really a fan of this cover, but that really doesn't matter. And it doesn't have the the vocabulary at the back of it at all. However, it does come with the missing final chapter that was left out of the US release, which I will talk about in a moment. Now, this book, a lot of people have actually seen Stanley Kubrick's version of A Clockwork Orange, a fantastic film starring Malcolm McDowell. Really, really brilliant movie. But a lot of people tend to kind of stray away from the novel itself, primarily because of the language. Now, what I mean by that is Anthony Burgess almost created a language for the narrator, the main character, Alex. It's kind of a mix of English and Slavic and Cockney rhyming slang and Russian all thrown in there. And it's kind of up to the reader to determine what the words mean based on the context. Now, when you begin this book, it might be a little challenging, but trust me, it really does get easier the more you read it. So I don't think you should consider that a hurdle. I think what might turn a lot of people off is the violence and the acts of violence that are perpetrated by the main character and his droogs or friends. But again, this is kind of a divisive book, but it shouldn't be, just because it's so important. It is really an important novel. It's possibly one of the best dystopian fiction novels. You can view it as ultra-violent, which is actually a term that was coined by Anthony Burgess when he wrote an essay regarding A Clockwork Orange. So you can look at it like that. You can look at it as black comedy. You can look at it as satire. Either way, it is an absolutely fantastic read. Just to give you a brief synopsis, if you don't want the entire book spoiled for you, the narrator, Alex, is a 15-year-old. He's violent. He and his little gang kind of go out at night and beat people up and rob people and commit crimes, all for the sake of just their young people who adore violence. Alex ultimately is arrested and undergoes a treatment called the Ludovico treatment, where any thoughts of violence cause him to be physically sick and in pain, as a way of kind of mind controlling him into only doing good things and only thinking good thoughts. So then you've got these really interesting themes of the nature of control, and if you take the choice away, are they really people? Do they really have a life? The nature of violence, how violence is going to affect society. It's a really in-depth book, told from the point of view of a 15-year-old with literally no life experience other than violence and prison. So if this sounds like something you want to read, there are lots of different copies out there. If you are a bit worried about the language, look for a copy that has the vocabulary in the back of it. So if you don't understand what a word means, you can go and look it up. My copy didn't have that, but it wasn't an issue for me. I thought it would be, but it really becomes a quick read. It's not a long novel by any stretch of the imagination, split into 3 acts or 3 parts, but a really fascinating character study from the point of view of the character, this 15-year-old boy, Alex. We get an insight into the relationship with his friends. We get an insight into the relationship with his parents. It's just a wonderful, wonderful read. And I would suggest, if you have seen the film, definitely read the book. I think if you are a little intimidated by the book, go and watch the film first. I very rarely say that, but I think it might actually open a gateway into Anthony Burgess and his novel, A Clockwork Orange. So I'm going to leave the introduction there, but I do want to thank Mr. Ian Van Gammet for his recommendation. I had an absolute blast with this one. I just finished it last night, and yeah, I'm just going to get straight into the next episode of
Read a fucking book. Read a fucking book. Read a fucking book. People.
Now, you might be wondering why there's a glass of milk on the cover of this edition, the Penguin edition of A Clockwork Orange. Simply put, Alex and his friends, Pete, George, and Dim, constantly go to this milk bar. Milk seems to be their drink of choice, I guess because they're all kind of teenagers still in school. So the book opens with them in this milk bar, and they go out, and after like chatting with some older women, they go out and they beat up this guy and basically rip up all of his books. And he's a scholar. And they go back to the milk bar, and because they were buying these ladies drinks, the ladies are like, when the police come, they're like, no, they were there the whole time. It's all good. They didn't leave. So they kind of get away with it. They go off. I might be getting some things a little mixed up in the order, but don't worry, it's kind of all the same. So they go off and run into a rival gang led by Billy Boy, who is Alex's kind of rival. And they get into a fight, and Alex and his gang win. And Billy Boy and his gang kind of slink off, and Alex goes home. They all split up. Alex goes home, wakes up the next morning, and it's at this point we discover his home life. He has a mother and a father. They both work. Alex is very into classical music, which was intentional. So Anthony Burgess, just a little aside, Anthony Burgess wrote this book after he came back to England and discovered that it had changed. There was like pop music and all of this kind of stuff. And he wanted a style of music in the book to be absolutely timeless, which is classical music. If he had written that Alex was into the modern pop music, he felt that it would date the book, and in the future a lot of people kind of wouldn't read it. So Alex is going to school, but he often skips school. So his parents go off to work, and he is visited by kind of a social worker almost, who tries to kind of convince him that violence isn't the answer and that he should kind of give up his ways and whatnot. But of course he doesn't. The next night, Alex and his droogs, friends, go out, and they end up going to this house out in the countryside. They steal a car. They drive out to the countryside, and they go to this house where there is an author and his wife living, a young couple. And the author F. Alexander, they tricked their way into his house, and he's actually writing a manuscript of a novel called A Clockwork Orange, a little bit of meta there. So they tricked their way into his house, and they beat him up, and they basically beat up and sexually assault his young wife. And then they, that was hilarious, and then they all go home. Now, this is where things get a little bit dark and kind of take a turn. And I say a little bit dark because I consider this one of the darkest parts of the novel itself. So the next day, Alex tells his parents he's feeling sick. He's going to skip the morning classes and he'll go to the afternoon classes. So his parents go off to work. His dad and him have this... It's a very strange relationship because his dad believes that he is actually working at night, and Alex is giving his dad money to buy lunch and things like that. So his dad thinks Alex is a stand-up person, whereas it's wool over his eyes. So you kind of feel sorry for his parents in a lot of ways. He goes to his favorite record store, and while he's there, he meets these two young teenage girls. He lures them back to his apartment where he drugs them and sexually assaults them, which was like above and beyond what I expected from the novel. But anyway, he doesn't go to school, of course, and I think it's a couple of days later, he meets up with Pete, George, and Dim, and we find out that George has this plan. There's a house that has a lot of valuable stuff, and they can rob it and go and take it to this guy who will fence it for them to make them some money. Now, Alex doesn't like this because it sounds like George wants to be the leader of the gang now. And so they get into a fight, and first of all, Dim fights Alex because Dim kind of is backing George. Pete kind of stays out of everything here. And Alex has this, it's like a stick with a blade on the end of it, and he cuts Dim's hand. Then he and Georgie get into a fight, and George ultimately loses that fight, and Alex kind of remains dominant in the gang. But you can tell there's hostility there now. The hierarchy thing is changing. But to keep the peace, Alex says, okay, George, what's your plan? Where's the house? Let's go. So later that night, they go to the house of, in the novel, it's referred to as the Cat Lady, but in the movie, the character actually has a name. And they go to trick her into opening the door, just like they did with the author. But she's not having any of it. She's like, fuck that. So Alex climbs into an upper story window and then comes down. This woman has a lot of cats and opens the door for the others, and they beat up this old woman. Alex, of course, doing most of the beating. And they take some stuff, and as they're leaving, they hear police sirens. Alex hits this woman, and she falls over, and as they're leaving, Dim basically cold cocks him and leaves him to be arrested, and the three other droogs get away. Alex is arrested, and while in police custody, he discovers that the old woman who fell hit her head, and she has now passed away, which means Alex is sentenced to 14 years in prison. Thus we end part 1. Part 2 is 2 years on. So he's been in prison for 2 years. Prisons are overcrowded, horrible places. Alex found out from a visit from his parents that George has been killed. He was killed in a robbery. Over 2 years, Alex has tried to be the model prisoner. He actually has a job in the chapel playing music during the church services. The pastor has kind of taken a liking to him, and they talk often about a lot of different things. Now, Alex is in a cell that's supposedly meant for 3 people, but there are 6 people in it, and at one point they get a 7th, this cocky little bastard who kind of struts around and tells everyone, this is how many people I've murdered, and blah, blah, blah. Alex has a bunk, and they tell this guy he has to sleep on the floor because all the bunks are taken. There's like 3 bunks on one side, 3 bunks on the other. Alex is in the bottom bunk on one of the sides. And that night, Alex wakes up and this guy is in his bed trying to touch him. Alex, of course, takes offense at this, and he wakes the other cellies up and they beat this guy up. And then Alex goes way overboard and ends up killing this guy. The prison guards and the warden and whatnot come, and all of his cellmates go, oh yeah, this was the guy that did it. They threw him under the bus. And so he's kind of taken away, and he's offered a chance to get out of jail in 2 weeks. And that chance is the Ludovico treatment. He says yes, he's can't handle prison anymore, and he knows that because he killed that prisoner, he is going to be in there for a long, long time. So he undergoes this treatment. This treatment is designed to stop any violent impulses. Every time a person who has finished this treatment has a violent impulse, they start to feel sick. They feel pain. So the only way to get rid of that is to think good thoughts and to do good deeds, which some people view as taking away choice. If you don't have a choice, if you only have to do good things, what kind of a life is that? You're basically losing your humanity. So that's kind of the philosophical argument in this part of the story itself, which is actually really interesting. He undergoes the treatment, and the treatment is basically subjecting him, they inject him with some drugs, and they subject him to these violent films, things like Nazi movies and movies of people being killed and whatnot. His eyes are open, so he can never close them. If he ever cries during one of these films, they come and they kind of dry his eyes out, and so it's not blurry, so he can still see the images. And over the top of all this is classical music is played, his favorite music, which then becomes an association, classical music with violence, which causes pain, which is another issue that will come up at the end of the novel. He starts to really hate these treatments, and he begs them to stop and whatnot, but the doctor just keeps telling him, you made this choice, it's all good, in 2 weeks you'll be free. So he undergoes all these treatments, and at this time he's kind of isolated from the rest of the prison population, and he has this plan to escape, but when the guard comes in, the minute he thinks about hitting the guard, he starts to get sick. So you know the treatment is actually working for Alex. Okay, gets to the end of his treatment. They give him all his gear back, but this is actually a test. He is in this large room. There are people watching him from up above. People like the governor and the doctors and the prison guards and the warden and all that stuff. And they put him in a room, and this large guy comes over and just starts to freaking like twist his ear and hit him and all of this kind of stuff. And the minute Alex thinks about fighting back, he can't actually do it. So he realizes he's got to be nice. He offers the guy a present, and the guy's like, you know, go away, you little shit, blah, blah, blah. Although there is very little swearing in this book. And then Alex goes, listen, I will lick your boots. And he gets down on his knees and he's about to lick this guy's boots. And the doctors stop the experiment, and the guy just goes away. And then the next test, this beautiful woman comes in, this beautiful young girl comes into the room, and Alex is immediately thinking about basically forcing himself onto her, and he starts to feel sick again, and then he realizes he's got to be nice, so he starts saying all these platitudes and everything like that, and the sickness goes away, and then she leaves, and that's the end of the test. It's obviously successful. The next day, Alex is released, given a little bit of money, and he is free to go now that he has been, in their eyes, rehabilitated. Brainwashed, so to speak. And that ends part 2. Part 3, he's a free man, so he decides to go home. He realizes after eating breakfast in this dingy cafe that his picture is all over the newspapers, that this new rehabilitation technique has been successful and crime rates should actually lower. He goes home and discovers that his parents have rented out his room to a lodger, this guy that is working in the town and needed a place to stay for, I believe, 2 years. And Alex is kind of incensed at this, and this guy has basically looks at Alex's parents as a mother and a father to him, even though they're about the same age. Alex's mother is really distressed because Alex still had the key to his house, and she's really distressed, and his father is like, we thought you wouldn't be getting out, what's going on? And he tries to explain and everything, and ultimately it all breaks down, and Alex is like, you know what, fine, I'll just go off on my own, don't worry about me, you will never hear from me again. And he leaves the apartment, and he realizes as well at this point that everything has changed. The apartment the complex used to be really dingy with graffiti and everything. It's all been cleaned up. So obviously, over the 2 years, crime has kind of lessened, but there is a reason for that. It's because they've hired more police officers, and they've also hired younger police officers. So he's wandering around, he goes to the old milk bar, and he goes to all these old haunts, and he goes to this club, and they're playing this pop music that he doesn't really understand or know. So he asks the DJ, can he spin him some Mozart? The DJ points him over to a booth, and he goes into the booth, and the DJ starts playing this classical music, and Alex starts to feel sick. He can no longer enjoy classical music because it reminds him so much of those movies that he was shown in prison. At this point, he wants to kill himself. So he's trying to find a way to kill himself that will be quick and painless. He doesn't know what to do. He decides to go to the library and look it up. He gets to the library and he goes into one of the reading rooms where he's confronted by the elderly gentleman from part 1 of the novel that he beat up and tore up all his books. The elderly gentleman gets all the old people kind of together, and they start fighting and beating the crap out of him, and he can't fight back because anytime he thinks of violence, he starts to feel sick. There is another gentleman there who tries to intervene, but it doesn't work. Eventually, the librarian calls the police. The police come to sort it all out. They break it up, and Alex realizes that the 2 police officers that are there, one of them is his old Drew Dim, and the other one is his rival, Billy Boy. Billy Boy and Dim recognize Alex. They kind of take it at face value that he was the one that started all of this. And Billy Boy says, you know what? Let's go for a little ride before we take him to the station. They drive him out into the countryside, out on the outskirts of town, and they beat the shit out of him, and then they drive off and they just leave him there. Alex, with nowhere to go, just starts walking, and he finally arrives at a house. He knocks on the door, and this gentleman answers it and sees Alex has been beaten up and brings him in, sits him down by the fire because it's been raining, so he's soaking wet. and goes to get him some whiskey, and they start talking, and Alex kind of reveals his story, and this guy says, listen, you go up, you have a hot bath, I'll make you some dinner, and you can stay here because my friends and I, we think what has happened to you is wrong. We read about it in the paper, and you're the perfect example of why this sort of reformation can't continue. It's at this point that we kind of discover that this gentleman that has taken Alex in is F. Alexander, the author from the beginning of the book who Alex and his friends broke in and they sexually assaulted his wife. And because of that, his wife is dead. I think she took her own life. F. Alexander realizes who this is after Alex kind of uses some terms and phrases and drops the name Dim. And he kind of knows what's going on. He's into it. So the next day, Alex wakes up and F. Alexander's friends have come, and they are all kind of impressed with Alex's story, and they want to use him to overthrow the government in the next election, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, I believe. They take Alex to this safe house where they say, you stay here, and he's got everything he needs, food and books and whatnot. Alex feels like leaving. He discovers that he's actually been locked in. And all of a sudden, the people next door, or whoever's next door, start playing or blasting classical music through the walls. This causes Alex a tremendous amount of pain. And he can't really take it. He's writhing around in pain and he just wants to end his life. So he goes to the window, opens it up, and throws himself out. But, one moment, let me just get my tablet, there we go. But he doesn't die. He hits the pavement, but it wasn't high enough to kill him. And he wakes up in hospital a week later, covered in bandages. His mother and father are there, and they tell him that Joe got arrested so he can come home and have his kind of room back. And he is visited by the people that put him in that room. They let him know that F. Alexander had targeted him, and because of that, he was arrested and jailed. And the nurses kind of come and the doctors see him, and he realizes that whatever happened to him with the Ludovico treatment, he is no longer under its influence. When he thinks about violence, nothing happens. He's kind of back to his old self. So the doctors have reversed the treatment that he got in prison, which makes him happy. So that is where the story would end for the American version of the book. The British version, the original version, has an extra chapter. In that extra chapter, Alex is with a new gang. So he's leading this new gang, and he actually runs into Pete, his old friend who didn't step in when George was trying to take over the gang. And he meets Pete and Pete's wife, and he's speaking the same way he always does. Pete is speaking normally, and his wife thinks the way Alex is speaking is cute and funny. And he realizes that Pete has a job and a family and all of that kind of thing, and he's kind of gotten out of the former life that he had. So they part, and Alex and his new gang kind of go out, and the new gang are committing acts of violence. But after seeing Pete, Alex kind of wonders, is this really what I want with my life? Maybe I want a family. Maybe I want to have a kid. but if I have a kid, is he going to end up like me? And we kind of see the change in Alex now that he's a little older and he's a little bit wiser in the ways of the world, but he's still a deeply flawed character. So that was the novel A Clockwork Orange. Would I recommend this book? Of course I would. It's not only is it a classic, it's a surprisingly fun read. Once you work out what the words mean, it's almost like learning another language, but a language so similar to ours that it just works. I really enjoyed it. Again, another thank you to Mr. Ian Van Gammon. I'm going to have a drink in your honor, mate. Check it out. Check out the film as well. The film is brilliant. Kubrick did a fantastic job. I believe it's one of his best, in my opinion. Yeah, not a lot else to say about A Clockwork Orange. The title I found really interesting. The author in the foreword to this book kind of describes it as clockwork being mechanical with no choice and an orange being natural. So it's the juxtaposition of the mechanical and the natural. Whether or not you see it like that is entirely up to you. It is an absolutely fantastic read that I would recommend to every single one of you little Plaguelandians out there. And if you're not a Plaguelandian, you should be. So like, subscribe, leave a comment, do all that good stuff. But most importantly of all, stay safe. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Go and talk to some of your droogs about the book. Read a fucking book, people.